Hi. Yes, I'm still alive. Sorry I was gone for a little while. I quit my job at Google, started a software company with my friends, and on this trip, I'm flying Air France. This trip was taken a little while ago on the French flag carrier's A350 business product in their older cabin, which I still think is holding up very well. We'll check out the service on board this overnight flight and see if the soft product matches both the quality and elegance of the hard. We'll be flying from Toronto to Paris, the first leg on a longer connection onwards to Dubai, totaling 7 hours over 3,740 miles. Air France operates out of Terminal 3 at Toronto's Pearson Airport. Despite the nomenclature, T3 is older than T1, not having received a facelift in recent memory. The French flag carrier and its sister airline KLM both have a presence in Toronto, operating one daily flight each. The check-in area was nothing out of the ordinary, with half a dozen economy check-in desks and a few special lanes for priority holders. Just cleared security. Now we're back inside of Terminal 3. This is kind of like a shared concourse between domestic and international. Not exactly the same as what they do over there at Terminal 1. This is the slightly older of the two buildings, and if you're wondering where Terminal 2 is, well, they got rid of it because they didn't like it. Pretty bog standard North American duty-free. Not the kind of like upscale shopping you'll find in LAX or YVR, but you know, not bad for Toronto standards. Headed over to the lounge though, because I'm really tired, really hungry, and there's a lot of people around here, and a little bit of a headache. Outside the lounges, the departure level seating is actually quite impressive. There are plenty of comfortable chairs, power outlets, and dining options through an order by tablet service. The international lounges are situated one floor above the concourse, and here we'll find the SkyTeam Lounge, operated by Plaza Premium. The space itself isn't particularly spacious, and not particularly well appointed either, giving off more of a utilitarian early 2000s food court vibe. When I visited, they were celebrating Air France's Platinum Jubilee in Canada, as denoted by the memorabilia adorning the walls. There is a small VIP area reserved for first-class passengers and anyone else who politely asks to go in. Here you do get a decent view of the south aprons. The center of the lounge hosts a food and beverage station along with more seating. The cold selection wasn't particularly inviting, bizarrely reminiscent of the selection that was offered at a P&G-hosted colorectal disease symposium I attended in 2014 at an airport Sheraton in New Jersey. The snack selection too had a peculiar resemblance to the next morning's continental breakfast. Other than the red label, the selection of spirits was more than agreeable, but despite this being ostensibly the French flag carrier's lounge, most of the wines were from Ontario, which, how do I put this politely, are rather shit. Hot food was on offer in an a la carte fashion, albeit with a limited selection. I got the sweet and sour chicken since it looked like the better of the two choices, although I do have a suspicion that it may have been cooked in a microwave. But it didn't matter, I was quite hungry and was just happy to have some hot food in me. I do have to say though, this lounge was overall a little underwhelming. I would understand if it were a contract lounge, but if you're gonna slap Air France and KLM on the name, there's a little bit more of an expectation, especially considering just how nice these airlines' respective flagship lounges are. Thanks to Toronto's atrocious traffic, I didn't have to wait too long, but just long enough to get bored. Speaking of being bored during short periods of downtime while traveling, let's talk about today's sponsor, Blinkist. As a machine learning engineer, I often get approached by friends and strangers alike, asking me what it means for their profession or industry when AI inevitably takes over. Now, I don't really have a very good answer for this, but I do like to point them towards a book that I personally found quite helpful on the subject, titled What to Do When Machines Do Everything. This is not that book. I gave my copy of that book away to a friend. The book itself is rather lengthy, but thankfully it's one carried by a resource called Blinkist. Blinkist is an app that distills nonfiction books down to a 15-minute read or audiobook, summarizing the most important takeaways and concepts. It's a great way to efficiently understand new ideas, or just preview a title to see if you want to read the whole thing. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I started a software company with my friends last year, hence why I've been a little bit busy recently. We have a Blinkist space where we share titles that we think might be worth a read. Most of our engineers are millennials and zoomers who have the attention span of an amoeba, so Blinkist's format of getting straight to the point has been really good on getting people engaged and actively discussing ideas for our tech stack and business. You can give it a shot yourself by using the link in my description box to get a 25% discount on an annual subscription, along with a 7-day free trial.
Captain, with our first officer Pascal Mias, we welcome you aboard Airbus A350 to Paris. Our startup within a few minutes from now. Today our flight time is 6 hours and 20 minutes.
Air France's A350s are laid out with 1-to-1 seating in an offset fashion, similar to what you'll find in United's Polaris business class, although I would argue that these seats are an order of magnitude better looking, with their classy curves and chic color choices. The French carrier does not offer a first class on its A350s. Instead, between the first two sets of doors, you'll find 34 of these Safran Aerospace Optimus seats. This product isn't the most spacious nor the most private. They're not all that ergonomic either. But in terms of being the prettiest, I think we might just have a winner. The attention to detail in this cabin is quite something else. From the tan leather accents to the understated color palette that gently whispers Air France. My seat for tonight is 8 Alpha, located on the port side of the plane. It's one of only 8 true window seats, named as such by its proximity to the window as opposed to the aisle. These are by far the most private seats, simultaneously offering the best view. Snatch one up if you can. Air France does offer free seat selection in business. Before we take off, let's do a quick seat tour, starting off as always with the overhead panel that sadly in this case does not include individualized air vents. The 1080p IFE screen is incredibly glossy and reflective, but equally bright, negating a lot of the glare. Below it, there's a USB Type-A charging port, along with a tray table that extends and swivels out. There's almost no discernible play in the table, and it also rotates to allow window seat occupants to get out of their seats during a meal or when there are other things on the table. The foot cubby is adequately spacious and doubles as storage when not in bed mode. There's also a small nook below it for your shoes. Beside your seat, the console has a cursory privacy divider and a very elegantly designed storage compartment. There's a mirror in here along with storage for the provided noise-canceling headphones. If you would like to instead use your own headphones, there's a 3.5mm jack, below which you'll find the media remote. We'll have a closer look at this later. Also hidden way down here is a universal power outlet. Beside the seat, there's a dimmable reading light, as well as your seat controls. Further down for when you're lying down, there are a few more seat presets. There's also a comically small armrest here, along with a literature pocket. The seatbelt comes with a shoulder strap for takeoff and landing, and the headrest is incredibly plush. On the other side, there's another fold-down armrest, and the window shutters are automatic. Overall, this is a very well thought out seat, one that ticks all the boxes for the modern luxuries that the modern business class occupant has come to expect. My only complaint, it's kind of narrow. Oh, another thing, be mindful of the storage compartment's door when you have a drink out. Someone in the cabin was not very careful and consequently became rather wet.
Into life.
The bathrooms on this A350 are pretty standard, apart from the uniquely Parisian attribute of having played host to a violent crime. Moving on. Above 10,000 feet, the Wi-Fi was switched on, so I had a look at what's offered. The packages weren't data capped, instead the fastest option offered service for the entire flight at 30 euros. However, after taking my money, it did take a solid hour for it to start working. Even then, it wasn't without frequent interruptions. Alright, moving on to the main event for tonight, the meal service, which started off with a pre-dinner drink. This being a French airline, I of course had to go with the champagne, lest I get savaged by an angry Parisian mob. Surprisingly, this champagne was not from a brand owned by LVMH, but was, perhaps unsurprisingly, very crisp. There were 2 meals served on this flight, a dinner with a few choices for mains, alternatively you can go for an express service, and a hot breakfast offered just before landing. Air France loves to hype its meal service and its promotional material, so as such you will forgive me for being slightly disappointed when dinner was presented as a tray service. I was hoping for a bit more panache, perhaps something a bit more ceremonious. To be fair though, it was a very pretty tray. What I can't complain about is the fact that they give you a selection of cheeses, desserts, and even appetizers, which came in the guise of 2 oversized canapes. There was a shredded duck creation that visually resembled an Ocean's tuna snack, and a scallop shiitake mushroom thing that was probably the highlight of the meal. For mains, I opted for the recommended choice, this chicken sausage with foie gras meatloaf thing. It didn't exactly blow away my mind nor my palate, being rather bland. I ended up adding a few dollops of the provided mustard just to impart a little flavor. As for dessert, well, it's hard to go wrong there. A generous selection of cheeses was served, along with more canapé-style desserts. The wine selection on board was overall also quite good, including a port as a nightcap. As we give the food some time to digest and alcohol time to break down, let's briefly go over the in-flight entertainment selection. As I said, this screen is incredibly glossy and reflective, perhaps intended as a feature so that you can do your makeup in it or pluck your nostril hairs, I don't know. Whatever the intention, the panel itself is bright enough to compensate, and navigation is made easy by this new Rave remote. As far as content goes, Air France was slightly below par for the course. They had a dozen or so theatrical releases, some contemporary English language films, and a handful of episodes from a handful of semi to mildly popular TV shows. As you would expect, there was a similar number of French language media, but also surprisingly an abundance of Chinese and Korean titles. All in all, the occasional Air France passenger probably won't struggle to find something to enjoy, but for the more frequent of flyers, perhaps bring an iPad. On this system, FlightPath 3D was a route map of choice. Won't go into it too much, other than the fact that there are 2 outboard cameras to stream. There seems to be some confusion, especially among the uninitiated, about whether or not business class seats fold fully flat. The answer is almost always yes, as is the case here. This seat was long enough that anyone within 2 standard deviations of average height would be able to sleep decently comfortably on their back, but don't expect to sleep on your side or stomach without some complicated maneuvering. In terms of bedding, there was a simple polyester duvet and pillow provided. There were no mattress pads, which is a bit of a shame since the fabric on these seats were not entirely the nicest to sleep on. The pillow was quite mediocre, not offering the most support, but I was okay since I managed to snag another one. This true window seat was adequately private, not sure about the ones next to the aisles. However, without any meaningful way to control the temperature of your space, that is left to the whim of the cabin crew, and on this flight, they left it quite toasty. Nevertheless, I have now become well versed in the martial art of sleeping while traveling at a non-zero velocity, and soon fell away into sweet, sweet unconsciousness. Perhaps it was the wine, but after 4 hours of sleep, I woke up with a pounding headache. Thankfully, an Advil managed to clear that up. I tend to travel with a small pouch of meds in my carry-on. Although most full-service carriers would have your medical captain essentials, just ask the flight attendants if you're feeling unwell. As we were crossing over the British Isles, the sun appeared over the horizon, ushering in the arrival of breakfast. Unlike some other European carriers, this meal was actually hot. The carbs mainly came in the form of this potato roasty. It's kinda like a hash brown, but Swiss and pan-fried. It was a little under-seasoned for the altitude, but nothing a little dash of salt can't fix. Air France apparently has its own branded granola, and it's actually really good. And despite being somewhat deflated, so too was the croissant, which also arrived warm. Breakfast on this flight was hot and hearty, one warmed even more by the glow of the sunrise as we began our approach. Okay, so, Air France. While this was not exactly a comprehensive look at the airline, an eastbound cross-Atlantic red-eye is a pretty good stress test for any carrier's business product. It's clear that the airline cares a lot when it comes to the appearance of their cabins, with their distinguishing design and immaculate execution. I do feel though that it comes at the slight cost of the comfortability of the seats. Yes, that's a word, come fight me. The beds are quite narrow, and I think a mattress topper would go quite a distance. Food too was a similar story. I feel that there was a lot more attention paid on how it looked rather than how it tasted. In all fairness, it might just be Pearson's catering, as the meals coming out of Charles de Gaulle on my next flight were a lot better. Now, service on this flight was kind of inconsistent. Full disclosure, I booked this itinerary as a return for my KLM flight, and since I asked for permission to film on that one, I assumed they knew who I was on this flight. Not that it made much of a difference to the service, which I think for the purposes of being objective is a good thing. Anywho, there were two flight attendants who took care of my side of the cabin. The cabin manager was very professional and polite, but the other guy, well, I asked him as he was passing by if he could take a photo of me. He sighed, took my camera, took one photo, handed it back to me, and left without saying a word. Wasn't a bad photo to be fair, but the attitude, not as good. Oh well, maybe he was just having a bad day, or he has that charmingly snooty Parisian flavor to him. Damn, Paris really do be out here catching strays in this review. At the end of the day, or rather in this case the beginning, I did manage to get some sleep, and arrived decently well fed and energized. This flight was part of a 4-leg round trip between Dubai and Toronto, for which I paid around $3,800. Overall, I think it was pretty decent value. Now, would I fly the airline again? Yeah. Air France has an even newer cabin on their 350s, one that I would very much like to try.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Paris, Charles de Gaulle Airport. It is 8:07 AM local time. We thank you for flying with Air France. Air France indicated partners wish you a pleasant day and an excellent onward journey if you're connecting to another flight.
If you've made it this far in the video, thank you very much for watching. And until the next time, safe travels.